Hi there. I'm here today with Crested Geckos because we're going to talk about some stinkin' rad facts about Crested Geckos, some of which you might know, some of which you might not. Crested Geckos were the first animal we ever covered on our channel, and part of the reason for this is because they are one of the best pet lizards you could possibly get. But another reason is because they are absolutely one of the raddest reptiles on the whole planet. Crested geckos are geckos, and geckos are one of the very few lizards that have vocal cords and vocalize as a way that they frequently communicate with each other. In fact, that's why geckos are called gecko, because there's a species of gecko that goes gecko. Tokay geckos are called tokay geckos because they go tokay. They're kind of like Pokemon, except the crested gecko doesn't go crested, it just kind of goes But Stinkin Rad. Crested geckos are members of the genus Correlophus. There are 3 total members of the genus Correlophus, and those are Correlophus bellipensis, which frankly looks just like a crested gecko with maybe slightly smaller fringes down its back. Honestly, if I had one of these right here, you would probably just assume it was a crested gecko. Also, Correlophus sarasinorum, or also called saras, which are actually fairly available in the pet trade. They're a little more expensive and a little less common than crested geckos. Really cool, really similar lizards. And Correlophus ciliatus, the crested gecko. Ciliatus actually means fringe, or eyelashes in Latin. Comes from the word cilia. Until recently, crested geckos were actually in the genus Rhacodactylus. The thing about science is we're always learning new things, and more recent studies have shown that they're actually not the closest living relatives to the other members of Rhacodactylus, which include things like Leachianus geckos and gargoyle geckos. And that Correlophus ciliatus, along with the other 2 members of their group, actually belong in their own genus Correlophus. They were originally discovered in 1866 by a French zoologist whose name I may butcher because I don't speak French, but it is Alphone Guichenot. If you speak French, feel free to correct me on that. I don't have any French skills. Until 1994, and I think this is one of the coolest facts about crested geckos, we actually thought that they were completely extinct. But following a tropical storm that came through New Caledonia, they were rediscovered on an expedition led by Robert Seipp, whose name I'm more confident in than Guichenot, but I still might be butchering. Today we know of at least 3 disconnected populations of crested geckos, one of them being on and near the Isle of Pines, and the other 2 on the main island of Grande Terre. Even though we know they're not extinct in the wild, they are threatened in the wild, and primarily by invasive ants. These are ants that were accidentally introduced by humans onto the island, and the thing is, they both eat crested geckos and they eat the food of crested geckos. So we actually have a whole video on why you shouldn't release your pets into the wild, and I'm not sure that these are a result of a deliberate introduction, but introducing invasive animals can be devastating for native fauna, and crested geckos are an example of this. In the wild and in captivity, they are generally either crepuscular or nocturnal. Crepuscular meaning they're active dawn and dusk, nocturnal meaning that they're active in the middle of the night. And as a result, they're active when there's not a lot of light, and they've got these gargantuan eyeballs with vertical pupils. Big eyes help for fairly obvious reasons, and vertical pupils actually can dilate much, much wider than a round pupil, which is why you will find vertical pupils on most nocturnal animals, like cats and nocturnal snakes, and you find round pupils on diurnal animals, like dogs and diurnal snakes. Like snakes and many other geckos, they actually have an eyelid that is fused closed and constantly protecting the eye, but transparent so they can see through it. And that transparent closed eyelid is called a spectacle. That means that crested geckos don't blink. Even when they're asleep, you'll see they bring these little eyelashes down a little bit, but their eye is still open, except for the fact that it's technically closed because there's a clear eyelid over the top of it. Sometimes, though, they will get debris on that eyeball, and unlike snakes, where it doesn't really matter because snakes aren't that visual anyway, and they're going to be bumping their eyes on stuff and clean it off anyway, for a crested gecko that would be a big deal because they're highly visual. And like a lot of geckos, they clean that spectacle by licking their eyeball, and that is both adorable and very functional. They have got, and this is actually something that they have in common with their entire genus, they've got some webbing between their toes and also kind of connecting their limbs to their body. And this probably helps a little bit with control while they're in the air because these geckos are big time into jumping. They're not very fast runners, generally speaking, but as you may see at times during this video, they're excellent jumpers, and so that's the primary way that they're going to escape from predators, is you start to get close, they're just going to leap right out of the bush that they're in. Leap to another branch or to the ground, and then they can scurry off. And if that doesn't work, they've got a plan B, which I don't love as a pet, but it works out great if you're trying to escape from predators, which is this lovely little tail of theirs. They can just pop that off whenever they want to. It'll wiggle around. Hopefully the predator goes after that while you scurry off. And with crested geckos, unlike a lot of other geckos, they never grow that tail back. And that's a bummer because that tail is really cool. Crested geckos have got toe pads, like a lot of other geckos, and these toe pads give them just phenomenal amounts of surface area, which allows them to build up a charge. Essentially, they fuse to whatever object they stand on, which is amazing. And if you'll notice, when they walk, they actually have to roll their toes back, kind of like you would peel tape off, because they literally can't pick their foot straight up. It has fused to the object that they're on, and this allows them to go on slippery leaves, also straight up walls, and with a lot of gecko species, straight across the ceiling, though with crested geckos, I haven't found that they're particularly good at that. They also have one of these toe pads at the end of their tail, and their tail is partially prehensile. It's what you'd call semi-prehensile, which means they can kind of use it to grab things. And they use it for a break when they jump. So they jump onto another object and they use that tail to stop themselves. And you'll notice when everyone loses a tail, they lose that break for a little bit and they all the time will overshoot things. It takes them maybe a week or two to figure this out, and then they start breaking with their feet. They're okay. But it definitely takes them some getting used to. It's not automatic for them. Their coloration, even in the wild, is highly variable. You don't tend to find any quite as radically colored as this one, but you find all kinds of reds and yellows and buckskins and browns and dark ones, different patterns like brindle, which is kind of like this guy over here actually, and also just solid colored geckos. They can have white fringes here on the edge on that webbing with their legs and in between their toes. These are things that you find commonly in the wild. In captivity, things get even more extreme. Due to line breeding, you get things like pinstriping and extreme harlequin and these super Dalmatians and all kinds of cool things. Those attributes are not found in quite as radical of a form in the wild. There are also at least 2 single gene morphs that exist of crested geckos. One of those being the lily white, and the other being Axanthic. There's also a piebald individual out there, but it appears that piebaldism is probably what you'd call a somatic mutation and something that he doesn't pass on to his offspring, so it's not heritable, it's not really a morph. As their name, Correlophus ciliatus, would suggest, they've got these rad eyelashes and they've got these crests on their head, which I adore, and these fringes down their back, and those are just amazing features. They're actually one of the things that makes me love crested geckos more than a lot of other really cool geckos. They're just so cool looking, like tiny little dragons that sit on your hand and maybe your shoulder and might jump off at any time. As adults, they're very, very easy to sex, meaning it's easy to tell males from females. With males, like you can see on this male here, you get a large hemipenal bulge right before the tail. These are not testes. Some people think that they are, but it is a bulge from the hemipenes, which is something that all lizards have, but not always in quite as exaggerated of a package as you find on the crested gecko. You can sex an adult crested gecko from across the room. Females might have a slight bulge there, but nothing like what you find on the males. However, as babies, it's very, very difficult. I find until about 20 grams, you don't really see much evidence of that bulge starting to develop. You can determine it by looking under what's called a loop, which is like a jeweler's magnifying instrument. You can try to look for femoral pores, and that does work if you know exactly what to look for, but it's tricky, so I don't ever feel confident in it until they hit about 20 grams. Like most geckos, they lay 2 eggs at a time, and with crested geckos, they tend to lay them about every 4 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit less, but right about once a month they'll lay 2 eggs, and their breeding season can last most of the year, so that might be like 9 clutches. Eggs incubate at a cooler temperature than what you find for many other lizards. A lot of people find that they're able to incubate them just fine at room temperature and they don't even need to use an incubator. And the babies are ridiculously cute. I told you they're ridiculously cute. This guy here is about a month old, so he's a little bit bigger than when he hatched. But because they only lay 2 eggs at a time, those eggs are actually fairly large and they come out sort of big compared to the size of the adults, but they're still so stinking cute and adorable that your little brain might explode. You just deal with it. They also eat an omnivorous diet. In the wild, they're going to be eating a lot of fruit. In captivity, they need Crested Gecko diet, which is largely fruit-based. And in addition to that, they will eat a few insects. And because of this diet, and a lot of other things about these guys, they really make fantastic pets. And that's why they were on our list of the top 5 pets for beginners, is because they are just an absolutely great pet lizard. And if you want more information about keeping them as pets, you should definitely check out this video here, right there, about keeping pet crested geckos, because in addition to being stinking rad, they are just great pets. If you liked this, if you have questions about crested geckos in the wild or in captivity, if you want to suggest other reptiles about which you would like to know some stinking rad facts, please comment. And as always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon. Covered on our channel. One of them, it's Alphone Guichenot, or something like unto it. If you speak French, feel free to correct me. I'm not prideful about my French skills. Okay, come on, guys.
I'd say Guichenot, or Guichenot.
That's what he said.
Guichenot.
Righteous. What would it be in Creole? One of them is on and near the island of Pines.
You okay?
Well, I'm fine.
Need some help?
Okay, nah, that'll work. Correlophus sarasinorum. Nailed it. And this happened during an expedition led by... Sorry. And this happened during an expedition led by... And this happened during an expedition led by Robert Seipp.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Nope!
Let's do it one more time. I was still laughing.
Oh yeah, stop it. They were on our list of 5 of the best... Oh, sorry. And that was why they were on the list of the top 5 pets for beginners and top 5 pets... Nope, that's the only one.